Okay, so I'm pleased to announce we've got the chairman here this evening, ladies and gentlemen, the MEP for North West of England, Mr. Nick Griffin.
Thank you, Mike. Well, I want to talk mainly tonight about really what happened in the elections and in particular where we go from there. But that's really pretty much for the old hands, and I know there's a few faces here, new people who've been brought in by the election. So I'll start off by saying really a little bit mainly to them, although I hope some of what I say will be useful to others of you when you're out on the streets or out on the doors. And that's really that when people think about the British National Party, the first thing they think about, the only thing they think about in some cases, is of course immigration. And if you come here tonight hoping to hear me talk about immigration, you're not going to, because frankly, I'm very lucky and I live in the middle of North Wales, where the only dark things are sheep. Still, even now, Welshpool, my neighbouring town, there's about 6,000 people, 1,000 of them are Polish. So we've got an immigration issue, but it's not on the scale of London, near the town of my birth, the city of my birth, my home city, where I, you, we, as you know, we're foreigners in vast areas of this city. And the simple thing, our position on immigration, is we, the British people, were never asked. We've got an absolute right to slam the door shut right now and insist that the politicians keep up to the promises they gave us right from the start, that all the criminal immigrants, all the illegal immigrants, all the ones who aren't loyal to Britain, all of the ones who refuse to fit into our society, they should all go home. In the nicest, quietest, gentlest way possible, but they've got to go. It's as simple as that. The ones who come here and have fitted in, even if we collectively didn't invite them, didn't want them, it's done and dusted now. That's happened. We put up with it and make the best we can. But if they're not prepared to fit into our society, they have no place in our country. Yeah. We're the indigenous people of this country. We have the absolute right, under international law and moral law and common sense and decency, to order this country so that our ways, our traditions remain preeminent, and so it remains our country for our children, their children, and forever and a day. It's as simple as that. The newcomers, if you've probably looked at the website and so on, you know where we stand on other key issues. The European Union. If people say we want a party which is against Britain being buried in a federal superstate, the BBC has trained them to think of UKIP. Well, I'll tell you what, myself, Steve Squire and others, the old hands, we were campaigning as youngsters against Britain's membership of the common market, while most of the people in UKIP were up-and-coming young Tories who thought it was a great idea. And we're the only party which has been there right from the very beginning, opposed to this monstrous disaster, who told it like it was right from the start, and who still have the only proper alternative to it, because UKIP's alternative to being ruled by Europe is basically to be ruled by the United States. Their alternative to having our trade dictated by Europe is to have it just free trade with all the rest of the world. And I'll tell you what happens if you have free trade with the rest of the world. British workers have to compete with Chinese workers who still earn about the 30th of our wage rate, which means that the very last industry will leave Britain within a few years. It's as simple as that. So the UKIP free trade alternative is no alternative to the EU disaster. To object to being ruled by one bunch of foreigners, to say we'll be happy to rule by another bunch of foreigners, is not a nationalist position. So we're the only party there, and our position on Europe is very, very simple. The very first thing we would do in power would be to do the thing you have to do before you can do anything else. Because while Europe controls our trade policy, controls our immigration policy, controls the Human Rights Act and all the rest of it, there's nothing that can be done anyway. The first thing a nationalist government needs to do on the very first day is to call a press conference, hold up a copy of the Treaty of Rome, and say, you see this? That's it. We are now a free and independent country once again. That's what we do, and it's the only thing that can save this country. But again, it's very simple. People have watched us for a while. You probably know where we stand on crime. And it's a very relevant issue to people in a city like London when low to medium level crime, or the fear of it, leaves millions of people frightened. Frightened to go out at night for fear when you get home that the place has been burned, and so on. Frightened to go out on the streets. Frightened to have your kids or your daughter or granddaughter walking down the streets. Crime is a real problem. Why is it a real problem? Because of the criminals, yeah. But the criminals are only there, wandering around and terrorising ordinary people, because the ruling elite have forgotten that one of the key jobs of a ruling elite on behalf of the decent law-abiding majority is to terrorise the criminals, to make the criminals frightened. They go on, oh, prison doesn't work, too many criminals, they go to prison, they come out again, they re-offend. The key purpose of prison isn't to rehabilitate criminal scum, it's to so punish the criminal scum and get caught that lots of people who are on the borderline think that I won't be criminal. Because there's not that many people in a society are innately criminal. But there's a lot, some are. There's nothing you can do with them except catch them and lock them up the key or kick them out of the country, or if they murder or molest children brutally, hang the bastards. That's the only thing you can do with those really dark people. Beyond them, there's a lot of people who are basically opportunistic. Young kids, regardless of race, creed and colour, kids wandering around London, some are kids, some imported ones, doesn't matter what they are, they're kids who are just there for the opportunity, and if crime is easy, crime's safe, crime pays, crime makes you look big in front of your mates, then they'll go down the criminal path. And the only thing to stop them and protect their victims, and actually even protect those kids, is to hand out so much bloody brutal punishment to the criminal scum that most kids don't want to go down the same route. So it's very, very simple. Our position is totally different to all the other parties. All the other parties, including the Tory party, who at election time pretend to be tough on crime. At the same time as at election time they pretend they're going to be tough about immigration. All those parties, when they see a criminal, they see a victim. Someone in society is somehow so screwed up that they go and do something terrible to other people. And they're so busy worrying about the rights of the criminal and what made the poor criminal a criminal, they forget the people who actually count in this equation, which is ordinary, innocent, decent people. And they're the ones who we're on the side of. It's very simple. You might not know, if you're really new to us, haven't looked at the website, that we've got a range of policies covering everything else. Just a couple of examples. The banks are big news at present. Everybody sees billions and billions of pounds being shoveled, our money and debt on our children's and grandchildren's and great-grandchildren's shoulders. Our money being used to bail out corrupt, useless, incompetent banks from the results of their own folly. And then these buggers have been bailed out with our money, then shoveling it into their own pockets in bonuses, while refusing to lend to ordinary small businesses and so on, and thereby slowly strangling the economy. And all the other parties say, oh, the banks are too big to fail. We don't. We say they cocked up. What's it to us? Let them fail. In fact, more than that, simply take them all over and put all the bad bits, all the rotten bits, in a rotten bank, and then have all the rest there as a decent bank, bring in the post offices, a bank which is there to serve the people. And it sounds very complicated, but it's not. Private banks create this country's money. The Bank of England is effectively a private bank. They create this country's credit. Then they lend it to us. If we're lucky, they lend it to us. Right now, with quantitative easing, the banks are being given money at 0.25% or 0.5%, and then asked very nicely if they'll lend it to the rest of us at about 10 or 15%. That's some business, isn't it? It's a bloody racket. I tell you, that's what it is. It's a racket, and we would take back the rights to issue credit away from the private banks and put it into the hands of the elected government of the day with proper safeguards around it. So that money would be spent into circulation. Instead of being given to banks to build up their own bank balances, it would be spent into circulation by the government doing things this country really needs, like rebuilding British industry, to create real jobs, making real things that people in this country need and the rest of the world wants. We could be the world leaders in wave power, for instance. Wind power is junk. Absolute junk technology. Wave power is real and it's effective. And Britain's the world leader, still, in terms of the research in our key universities. Is it being developed here? Is it? Hell's like. This country, all the way around, especially the more northern edges of this country, places like Barrow-in-Furness, places like the towns of the ports of the northeast, places like Glasgow. This country is still full of middle-aged men who've got fantastic skills in shipbuilding, and they're rotting on the dole or they're stacking shells in bloody Astos. And the skills they've got are fading away as they reach retiring age, as they die, while young lads especially don't get any skills, no apprenticeships. When we put this together, and take this technology and invest in it properly and say, right, in the next 5 years, Britain is going to be the world leader in applied wave technology. And every single country with a coastline in the world would beat a path to our door to buy the things that are made in our factories. It's really simple. And the government says, we can't afford it, or it's not our job. It is the government's job, and if they can afford to bail out the banks to the tune of hundreds of billions of pounds, then they can certainly afford to rebuild British industry doing things like that. It's very, very simple. You can only hear it from the nationalists, and that is why they won't let me on Question Time, because they want the public to think that if you say, I support the BNP, that, oh, you're just a one track, at the very most, that you're against immigration, at the worst, that you're some kind of crazed Nazi bigot. That's what they want people thinking. They don't want people understanding that we've got policies and ideas that are really attractive to people on a huge, wide range of issues. They don't want people to know that when it comes to the war that we had in Iraq, the war in Afghanistan, the bombing flat of Libya, a fortune of our money, handing it over to Muslim crazies, and the next war they've got planned in Iran, they don't want the public to know there's an alternative to that. Because all the other parties are in favour of that, and we are not. We simply say that the Middle East isn't Britain's business. Afghanistan isn't Britain's business. It doesn't matter what they do with their human rights, whether they educate their schoolgirls or not. It's up to them. That's their business. It is not Britain's business. And all the human rights in Afghanistan and all the oil in Iraq and all whatever the cause of war in Iran isn't worth the bones of one British soldier or the tears of one British mother. Or finally, you could look at something which, just as one example, it looks quite small. Actually, it's quite important. This is about the core of our community. I'm absolutely shocked. I drive around Britain more than probably anyone here, unless you're a professional driver. And the number of pubs that I see boarded up, shut down. Not just in areas where there's a demographic problem, because virtually everyone there is now Muslim and they don't drink, but all over. Just swathes of them. Now, you might think, well, so what? Pubs just there. No, it's the heart of our community in a really, really deep way. And I believe, to my mind there's no doubt about it, that the ruling elite are deliberately killing off pubs. Yeah. Deliberately. Because it's the pub is the place where a community meets, where people talk and exchange ideas, where they talk about the things that affect their families, their community, their area, and where still you see a lot of the charity work done in this country. Things like Help for Heroes and so on. So much of that is based around people in a pub getting together and deciding to do something to try and do their little bit to make things better. And the ruling elite running this country, they don't want ordinary people sitting around talking, exchanging ideas. I'll tell you what they want. They want you slumped in front of a television. They want the whole population slumped in front of a television where people take in what the BBC tells them or take in what Sky, which is owned right by Rupert Murdoch. They just take in what the ruling elite want you to take in, and not to ask awkward questions about how the crooks who run this country are privatising it and ripping off and sending us all to hell in a handcart. So they want pubs put out of business. And on top of that, so it's not just the political impact, it's the core of our community. And this stuff, it's in many ways the core of our culture. Now, alcohol can be really bad, and it's at its worst when people out of desperation or boredom sit and drink it at home, having bought it in a supermarket, and sit there, slumped in front of the goggle box, drinking and probably smoking, because you can't do that in the pub either. That's what they want. They make the maximum profit out of tax, because sold to the supermarkets it's dirt cheap. They sell it as a loss leader, so the government make a maximum, most of it is tax. The government make the maximum money, and they destroy our community and our sense of identity. So we've got a position on pubs and so on, and tax on beer and all the rest of it. You don't want people, to be honest, drinking at home. That's the way to be an alcoholic. And alcohol, probably a lot of you have got people in your family or no friends who've been destroyed by alcohol. It's a really dangerous drug, as a matter of fact. But it's a key part of our culture. So what we do, yes, we would tax alcohol. We tax the alcohol sold in supermarkets really quite a lot, pretty damn heavily. But if a pub is selling beer made within a 50-mile radius, there'd be no tax on it. So that would help local breweries. Not the big corporations turning out chemical pap, but it helped local breweries. That'd be a start. And then there'd be a grade, and overall, any alcohol sold in a pub would have less tax on it than the alcohol that's sold in the supermarkets. And that means if people want to drink, they go back into the pubs where it's controlled, where at 11 o'clock they call time. Because that's another thing that's been a problem. So alcohol does need to be controlled, but it needs to be controlled in a way which is compatible with the survival of our pubs, the survival of our community, the survival of our traditions. Now, you put all those sort of policies together, and I've already touched on it. If you want to know more, go look on the website and so on. You put all those together and take the party label off and talk about it in any workplace, pub, bus queue, anywhere in Britain, and everybody would say, that's what I want, that's fantastic, why don't they see that? Why can't we have a party like that? And then of course you might tell them it's the British National Party, and some people will go, ooh, not so sure now, and thereby hangs the problem, because these ideas are very popular. As a matter of fact, if you've been out with the tabletops, which we do quite a lot in London, you'll know that we're very popular. And when you're standing there with a petition, get a referendum on Europe, or bring our boys home from Afghanistan, whatever it is, with British National Party all over it, people literally come up and queue, don't they, to sign. So we're not unpopular at all. That's an absolute myth. But there is this disconnect between what the public wants and what we've given, and our popularity in soft terms. And when it comes to the ballot box, it's not actually German. There's no point pretending it is. It isn't. In fact, over the last couple of years, our votes have gone down. Why is that? First thing to note is it's not just us. The key fact is that up until 2009, the Labour Party were the government. Very unpopular, and most nationalist voters are working class. That's a simple demographic fact. So when the Labour Party's in power, they want to kick the government. How do they kick the government? Either by voting Tory or by voting for us. Working class people tend not to like the Tory party, so really we're the ideal way of kicking the government when the Labour Party was in power. And that's what they were doing. We were kicking the Labour Party all over the floor, weren't we? All over this country in electoral terms, up until 2009. And then, 2010. Bang, they're in power, and things switch. And within a few months, working people who wanted to kick the government, they may want to vote for us. They may well know that the Labour Party are a useless, thieving bunch of multicultural, anti-British vermin. They know all of that, but they hate the Tories so much. They think if the Tories carry on in power here, they're going to close down this, they're going to cut that, and all the rest of it, so I've got to vote Labour. These are the ones who are voting. It's an important thing. So, as a result, fundamentally of that, nationalist votes have gone down. Not just ours, our vote went down in London. It didn't crash, it didn't collapse. Our vote basically halved. The National Front vote went down to 1/6 of what they got in the previous election. The English Democrats' vote went down even more. In working class areas in various parts of the country, UKIP's vote, UKIP are the sort of the BBC's pet nationalist party. If Farage is never off question time and so on, but their vote went down even more. Catastrophic declines in their votes, and ours actually, we've done the best out of all of them. Our vote, our core vote, has held steadier than any other nationalist or pseudo-nationalist party. There's nothing wrong with us. There's nothing wrong with our party. It's just the circumstances out there. Now, having said that, if we're going to keep on banging our head against the same electoral brick wall for the next 2 or 3 years until the Labour Party gets back into power, at the end of it, we're going to have a fairly sore head. So we've got to think carefully. This is what I really want to talk about tonight. So this is mainly more for the old hands, although afterwards I also appreciate kind of a chat with me or feed it up to Mike what the newer people here think of what I'm going to say now. Because I'm proposing really a significant change in what we do. First of all, let's have a look at the other factors as to why our vote has gone down. The factor I talked about before, the Labour Party being out of power now, affects everybody. There's certain things that only affect us. First of all, my colleagues in Europe say, because they get it as well, the Front National and the Relaunched and so on, they say we're demonised. Actually, I don't think it's the right phrase. We're not demonised, we're dehumanised by propaganda. Constantly, morning, noon and night on television, we and our activists and people who think like us are dehumanised by the mass media, treated as subhuman scum, portrayed as that. and it has an effect. I'll give you a couple of examples. The Sun, biggest circulation newspaper in Britain, steadily declining, I'm glad to say, because the newspapers are dying on their feet. But during the 2010 general election, the Sun produced an appalling smear about how the British National Party was supposedly, remember the business with the Gurkhas? But the Gurkhas, elderly Gurkhas who'd served this country faithfully for pennies, weren't being allowed into this country to be treated. We've got an international health service. They'll let any bastard who can crawl through the door just about alive can come here. And whatever they've done to themselves even, if they've never paid anything into this country, they can come here and get themselves treated and put right at our expense. And then usually stay here and bring their families. Every two-legged, featherless thing in the planet, it seems, can come here and book into our hospitals, except the poor Gurkhas. One of the few bunches of outsiders to whom this country actually really owes something, and it deserves something. We'd always made that very clear, that we wouldn't let the Gurkhas en masse come and settle here, and their families and all the rest of it. It'd be so expensive. If we're going to do that, we'd do better to pay our own soldiers more money and recruit more of them. But ones who serve this country and then need medical treatment as old men, to turn them away is an appalling betrayal of trust and common decency. And we'd said that, and the Sun, in the run-up to that election, said, oh, the BNP, they're so racist, they wouldn't let the Gurkhas come in. And that cost us a lot of votes. It was a complete lie. They got one of their far-left friends to produce a fake British National Party leaflet. Then they reproduced the fake British National Party leaflet and wouldn't quote us saying it's not our leaflet, it's the far left. And that undoubtedly cost us a lot of votes. That's the kind of thing we had to put up with. Hasn't stopped now. I was in Dalkeith in Scotland on Sunday. Saturday. In Dalkeith for this reason, that there's a fellow called Robert Greens, who's a rapist who raped and battered a young student nearly to death. And he was in prison for some years. He got out after about 8 years. After what he did, he should have been hanged. It's as simple as that. There's no question of it. A most appalling, sick crime. And he's out, and he's been rehoused a couple of miles from where he nearly murdered this girl he raped. And he's openly said to people, he's openly quoted as saying, he sometimes feels the urge to rape again. And this piece of human excrement is walking the streets of Dalkeith. And the main political parties up there, the Labour Party, the Scottish National Party, the police, the courts, the press, they're all saying, oh, this is fine. It is human right. Is it hell as like? It's the human right of the families of Dalkeith for their daughters and their mums to be able to walk the streets day or night, rain or shine, wearing as much or as little as they want, without having to worry about a sick piece of filth like that. That's the only human right that counts in these circumstances. But the ruling elite have forced Robert Greens on the people of Dalkeith, and there's been a lot of protests. People are really up in arms about it, and a lot of local people had asked us for help, and we've actually given them help. We've helped to fund the several of the protest groups who are working against it, just sort of quietly, without making a big thing about it. And so we went up there to make the point that people up there who are disgusted with the political process, because all the politicians are saying, you're bigoted, you are, when you oppose this poor man, he's got his human rights and all the rest of it. That's making people sick of the whole political process. It's one reason, as Mike said, votes, the number of people who turn out at each election drops and drops and drops. That's exactly the kind of thing that makes it drop. As ordinary people look and they think, these bastards up there, what's the point of voting for them? Well, they don't even get a simple point like that something like Robert Greene should not be walking our streets. So we're there to show to people that there are some people in the political process who actually get it and stand on the side of ordinary, decent people. So we were there, and the Sun produced a story up in Scotland, the Scottish version of it was the same paper, saying that we were in Dalkeith protesting against the people who were protesting against Robert Green's. So we specifically had a demonstration, and we've helped to push and fund and assist the people trying to get this man out of their town. But the Sun presented our demonstration as we were on the side of a rapist. Absolutely sick. If they came out with lies about that, like that, about any other party, then the other papers would rip them to shreds. The Sun's telling lies again, the Star would say, and the Express would say, and the Mail would say. And they'd impose so much pain on them, in terms of people turning away and buying other papers, that they'd soon realise they should tell the truth. But because it's us, it's a different kettle of fish. There's a second field in which we're uniquely treated compared with the other parties. The oppression this party goes through is beyond belief. It would destroy most political parties. The older hands will know that we had a 2-year battle with the Equality Commission and their 70 taxpayer-funded lawyers just to survive as they tried to close us down. And that started just after we won the seats in the European Parliament, and they openly said, we're picking on the BNP now because they're relevant. We're not going to pick on the National Front because it's a tiny little joke. We're picking on the British National Party because 1 million people have voted for it, and because 1 million people have voted for it, we've got to crush it. They said so much in as many words, these people, this Equality Commission, most of whose members are members of ethnic minorities. So much for equality. You know, where's all the white Brits working for the Equality Commission? When it's recognised that, for instance, young white working class boys in London are absolutely the lowest point on the attainment charts in schools. So if the Equality Commission was going to do anything, they should suddenly jump in, get themselves a lot of young-ish white English role models and start sending them to schools to bring our lads up in the league tables, because it's clearly discrimination, the fact they're at the bottom. But oh no, that's not what the Equality Commission is for, so nothing's going to get done. No one else has to put up with that. I'll give you an example from a bit further afield, because that Equality Commission case was here in London in the High Court. I'm sure you've been past it a few times. A bit further afield in Liverpool, in the mayoral election. Not that far gone now. The police, no less. Well, first of all, the local newspaper went around to everyone who'd signed our nomination papers. 30 people signed our nomination papers in Liverpool, that's the standard. And the local press went and knocked on all their doors, trying to intimidate them into saying that they hadn't known it was the British National Party when they signed. And under this pressure, one person cracked and said, no, I was conned. They weren't, of course. But when the local paper is saying, well, how do you think your neighbours are going to find out if we tell them that you knowingly voted for this fascist party? And so on. So one person cracked. Once they got that, they sent the police round, and the police were leaning on people, telling them they could lose their jobs. If they're in social housing, they could lose their houses for backing the British National Party. So one or two other people then sort of wobbled a bit, with the result the police were then able to take this fictitious BNP fraud and use it as an excuse to literally smash down the door of our candidate a couple of days before polling day, so that the 2 days before polling day, the local paper, the Liverpool Echo, had 2 front-page stories about this shocking thing the British National Party had done. What the British National Party had done was give people in Liverpool a choice. That's all we've really done. And that's what they don't want. So we got that. Can you imagine if that was in Russia, what the BBC would say about how wicked Putin's government was and how undemocratic it was and how everyone was going to be up in arms? It'd be on the TV and on the paper day after day after day. And interviews with the mayoral candidate and pictures of his smashed down door. Because it's us, absolutely nothing. Yeah, most parties wouldn't even survive that kind of pressure, but we made tough stuff, and we do survive that kind of pressure. And then, absolutely recently, in Glasgow, on Friday, this last Friday, doors started getting smashed in at 6 or 7 in the morning. People started getting arrested early at work. And over the course of a day, the police arrested no fewer than 12 British National Party activists and members of the Scottish Defence League, with whom we have a good relationship. And they held them over the whole weekend, mainly to stop them coming to the demonstration in Dalkeith and to terrorise other people into not going. Now, all those lads are up in court today, and the police were shamefaced. The police prosecutor didn't really know where to put his face, and they haven't got any charges. They've got serious enough evidence to go and arrest 12 people at home or at work, but when it comes at the end of the weekend to actually presenting charges, they said, well, no, we don't quite know what to charge them with. They were saying that chanting pedo scum off our streets is some kind of offence. They were saying that using the word Muslim, as in Muslim bomber, is racially aggravated, threatening words and behaviour. But then they realised that can't be the case, because Muslims are not a race. It's a religion. You cannot apply the race laws to Muslims. You could apply the religiously aggravated, but to have religiously aggravated, you have to have actually a threat against the minority religion. And this wasn't any kind of threat, it was just saying Muslim bombers off our streets. The far left can come along and chant Nazi scum off our streets, and that's fine. Yes. But a group of our lads do it, and they were hauled before the courts. But as I say, we don't know what's going to happen there, because when it came into court today, the police didn't know where to put their face and didn't have a case. So they've released them all, they sent them home, and they said, you might be hearing from us in due course. What kind of country are we living in where people can get hauled away in front of their young kids or hauled away at their workplace for something which the police and the courts then say, well, we think it's an offence, but we're not sure what it is. Absolutely outrageous. And it's not an attack on us, primarily. This is an attack on you. It's an attack on all the people out there, whether they want us or not. It's an attack on the fundamentals of democracy. It's an attack on the rights of any organisation to put forward a certain specific view in fairly blunt terms, which is what happens in politics, because we're all going to sort of slime around and not say what we really mean and use 6 words where 1 word will do, then everyone's going to sleep with boredom. So yes, it is quite blunt what we say, and that's the basis of democracy. Different political parties holding different views and expressing them quite bluntly so people can think, yeah, whose side am I on? That's the very core of democracy, for which hundreds of thousands of people have died in this country, and many, many thousands have been locked up over the years fighting for that democracy, and now it turns out that having had 2 world wars to defend it, we've still got to fight to defend it in this country. So we're here fighting to defend it. And we'll win in the end, because the police in Liverpool tried this a few years ago. There they arrested 13. At the end of it, all the ones who pleaded not guilty got themselves compensation of several £1,000s each for having had their human rights interfered with. And the Liverpool police generally have behaved themselves since then. When we're on the streets of Liverpool, they leave us alone. We are going to teach the police in Glasgow the same bloody lesson. So we're still here, and we're going to keep here. We're going to carry on. But what we do need is we need a new motor for growth. Because the motor for our growth up until 2009 was winning in elections, or coming, what was it, down in Bexley, wasn't it, very early. The Guardian had, in about 2003, they had a headline, the town where 1 in 5 votes BNP. It wasn't, by more recent standards, it wasn't very many. But it was a significant thing. That was the motor of our growth. The fact that more people were turning to us in the ballot box. And it was a very good motor for quite a long time. But it's not now, because for the reasons I've gone into, at present, more and more people aren't turning to nationalists in the ballot box. The wheel will turn, will come round again, when people see enough places controlled by enough Labour councils making enough of a shocking mess of it, and then on top of that, when the Labour Party get back into power nationally, within a few months it'll turn round, and they'll be weighing British National Party votes at that stage. But it's a couple of years off. We're not there yet. So we need a new motive of growth. What's it going to be? Well, the first thing is to understand that most people who don't vote for us don't vote for anybody. That's the real core of where the vote we should be getting has gone. Because all the people who you talk to out there who agree with us, all the people who wave at me going down the street and so on, people who come up and shake our hands, the people who come up and sign our petitions, most of them, when it comes to voting, don't bother. So 60% don't bother to vote, 70% don't bother to vote. There's quite a few areas in local council elections where the turnout's about 17%. Most people do not vote, and it's becoming fewer and fewer. Why not? It's not they're against us. If they were against us because we've been dehumanised and bullied and pushed down and rendered unacceptable, supposedly, then they'd be voting for someone else. They're not voting for anybody. Why?
The system.
It's the system. And it's specifically what they'll tell you. You knock on the door at election time. I'm calling about the election. You're all the same. Bang! door slammed in your face. That's the only hostility that British National Party get, usually our people get when we're out canvassing. The only hostility isn't from people who don't like us, it's from people who don't like them. And they think that we're them, because we're in the political process. That's the real problem, the ones who don't think that we're different. The ones who think we're all the same. That's what we've got to break. We've got to show people that we're different. How? What I propose is that we need to specialise in hitting back in a law-abiding, legitimate, but quite in-your-face sort of way on behalf of the silent majority. Yes, we need to carry on contesting elections, and we'll carry on contesting elections, and we'll contest them better than we do now. But we need something on top of that to remind people that we're different and to get ourselves into the headlines. So, for instance, the headmaster who's in the papers punishing a 6-year-old because he or she has said or done something that this headmaster crank thinks is racist. And people read it in the Sun, they read it in the Mail, they read it in the Star, and they think that's disgusting, somebody should do something about it. But does anybody? No. Newspapers sell newspapers about it. That's the only thing anybody does. But that headmaster, he's got a school, he's got a home, somewhere nice and leafy, he needs a demonstration. He needs a British National Party demonstration outside his school, and at 8 o'clock on a Sunday morning, when the family whose kid he's bullied and brutalised and ruined a part of their life and given them a sort of pseudo-criminal record, while that family is lying awake worrying about it, then this bastard headmaster needs to find at 8 o'clock in the morning a small, polite group of British National Party members on his doorstep, leafleting his road, saying, do you know what kind of a scumbag lives here? A man who bullies 6-year-old children. That's who lives next to you. He needs to get it. And then he'd go running to the press and so on. It'll be in the papers about how wicked we are for standing up for something decent, for bullying a bully. That is an example of what we could do. The local education authority, who insist over and above what the government says they've got to do, that's bad enough. The local education authority, who insists that all 5-year-olds must learn the details of sex education, heterosexual and homosexual, in class. What kind of sick, twisted pervert has that kind of mentality? That kids had to be forced to have that kind of thing. Sex education is fine for children of an appropriate age, but not for 5-year-olds. They should be left with their innocence. They should be left in dumb ignorance about it. It's not for them. And yet, you've got councils insisting that that must be done. And when parents complain, they turn around and say, what's wrong with you? Are you a homophobe? What's wrong with you? And they start bullying the parents for wanting to stand up for the innocence of their kids. Now, no one's doing a damn thing about it, other again than the newspapers, setting people up to feel angry about it as they read it, but nothing else happens. And that's one reason people are so sick of this country. Because there's so many things are wrong, they read every day. There's so many things are wrong, obviously wrong, and no one does a damn thing about it. And we can make ourselves different by being the people who do something about it. The judge who lets some sex offender out again because he can't lock him up, because he might breach his human rights, and he's an asylum seeker to boot, so we've got to look after him. We have hellers like, he should be on the first plane out. But if we can't get him on the first plane out, at least we should make it clear that for a judge to make that decision, and they don't have to follow the rules, they don't have to follow these laws, they're interpreting the law. And what you've got here is radical left-wing judges who are fundamentally in their own heads, in favour of asylum, in favour of sexual perverts, putting these things together, and they're using the law to impose their vision, their ultra-left-wing vision of how society should be, how our society should be changed and twisted into the society that they want to build. And they've been doing this for 30 years, and no one has ever pulled them up on it. No one's ever picked on them for it. And these people, you remember from school, whether you were bullied or whether you were a bully or whether you were watching bullies, that all bullies are the same. They're all big and tough and ever so mean until some little kid finally goes, bang. And then they're his best mate after that. Yeah, bring him sweets and all the rest. Because it's in the nature of a bully. It's the nature of human beings and animals. It's like when the cat runs away from the dog chases the cat. The cat turns around and goes, the dog never touches another cat again. And on behalf of ordinary, decent people in this country. I believe it's time we went to some of these bullies and went, bang, in a moral sense. Perish the thought, I should mean that. No. In a moral sense. The politicians, like Baroness Wazi, who's there with the most obviously blatant fraud at the public expense, and if this is shown on television, on TV, on bnptv, Baroness, come and sue me if you want. But she's been let off because the police, in response to my complaint, took it on briefly to start with, and then said, oh no, it's been left to the House of Lords Committee. So a group of their own policemen and their own mates have said, no, it's quite okay what Baroness Wazi did. Now, I don't think what she did was okay, because she's taken money to which she wasn't entitled, but she said, but it's okay, I gave it to somebody else. So let me show you how this works. You can have that. See, that's quite okay, because I didn't steal it, I gave it to somebody else. That is what Baroness Wazi did. And people wonder, out there, the great and the good and the newspaper editors, they wonder why people are sick of bloody politicians and sick of the system and don't vote. It's things like that, because it's absolutely disgusting. And she's still there as a chairman of the Conservative Party, and it's tremendous because she's the first Muslim woman in the House of Lords and all the rest of it. So she's some kind of special, sacred little cow. Well, I think we should have a go at politicians like that. Again, nothing violent, nothing nasty, but something quite rude, just turning up on their doorsteps and their neighbours' doorsteps on a Sunday morning in their nice leafy lanes, pointing out that these people are doing very, very well at the expense of the public, who are getting screwed into the ground by their rules and their taxes and their failure and their corruption. We need to stand up for ordinary people. There's plenty of examples. One other one, just finally, just to show I'm not just picking on the political elite and so on. What about these banks? These banks who are shoveled huge amounts of money in order to prop them up, and then give enormous bonuses to their main directors, and are then, over the next few months, you mark my words, going to be at the very forefront of the people reclaiming the homes of ordinary decent families who can no longer make ends meet. I think they're legitimate targets, whether it's outside the homes of key members, or occupying their offices, or just making ourselves a bloody nuisance against those people on behalf of the ordinary people who are the victims of the greed and the incompetence of the elite, whether it's politicians, the judiciary, the banks, the corporations. They're all of them doing very, very well for the expense of all the rest of us. And someone needs to do something about it. Whether it's their doorsteps, or on their roofs, or on their offices, in their offices, there's plenty of targets that small numbers of nationalists, I'm not saying everyone here must come and do it, absolutely not, but small numbers of nationalists who want to, and are properly supported, can do it. We should become, I'm proposing, in effect, if you like, the Greenpeace of the silent majority. We should become the Justice Department of the British people, for and on behalf of the British people. We'll still carry on with elections, as I said. We actually need to, there's plenty we can do, as Mike was saying, these postal votes, that's the key reason Labour win elections. Above everything else is the fact that they've mobilised, in every single ward, they've mobilised about 1,000 voters with postal votes who they now are vaguely sympathetic to them. And they just work on them. And the remaining 6, 7, 8,000 voters, they're lucky if they get a leaflet from the Labour Party. They don't need it, because they've got postal votes. And it works. So we've got to work on these things so that when the electoral cycle turns, we're streets ahead. That's got to be done. But it's not the core motive, the motive that's going to make this party grow. What's going to make this party grow, I believe, is for us to be seen, to be leading the way with militant but peaceful, rude but legitimate direct action on behalf of ordinary people and against the people who bully and screw ordinary people. It needs working on. It needs a lot of organisation. It's not something we can rush into in things like what's been going on in Scotland. We've learned a lot of lessons. We'll learn more lessons. We need, for instance, a system within the party so that the inactive can help and not feel left out. Now, to an extent, that's going to be things such as fundraising events, so that the lads and the lasses who are on the front line, who are going to get nicked on occasions, have actually got support. They've got legal representation. So they're not left up there. We don't wind them up, point them in the right direction, and hope it's okay. By the way, I'm not asking anyone to get arrested in ways that I haven't got arrested, or tried to get myself arrested. I constantly try to get myself arrested when the police are being troublesome. Several times recently we've had events where we've been told, as I'm going to the event, the police are saying, oh, they'll arrest anyone who hands out anti-halal ritual slaughter leaflets. I'm going, yeah, give me these leaflets, I'm going to get myself nicked. And they see me with the leaflets, and they suddenly change, oh no, you can hand the leaflets out after all. Damn, foiled again. We're not asking people to commit heinous crimes, which is going to get them locked away for 30 years. We're asking people to do things which might, if they're unlucky, or lucky if you look at the other way, get them 14 days in prison. Because if you think back to probably the greatest and most effective struggle for civil rights in this country in history, the suffragettes. Women didn't get the vote in this country by being good. They got the vote in this country by helping win the First World War, but also by making a huge fuss and by causing all sorts of trouble. And I'm not proposing anyone throws himself in front of the Queen's horse, or even Lily Allen's horse. Not even that one, no. But I am proposing that we be a little bit tougher and a little bit more militant. We need, where people volunteer, and we are talking volunteers, when people volunteer to be at the front line of this, we need to train them on the tactics, and in particular, what to do when you're arrested. As a matter of fact, this does apply to everybody, because you think of Emma West, wasn't it? Just losing it on the tram in Croydon, as I'm sure that everybody in this room has thought, yeah, there, but for the grace of God, because I could have lost it in that way. Because it makes you so mad what's happened to this poor city of ours, what's happening to this poor country of ours. Anyone can be in that position. You don't even have to rant like she did. You can simply say the wrong word. You can literally look the wrong way. You can. There was a case a few years ago when someone handing jelly babies around in the office offered a black one to a black person and ended up in court for it. Honestly, you might have forgotten that one. So don't think that when we start to say to people, you need to learn what to do if you are arrested and accused of a thought crime, don't think, cool, not me, Gov, I'm not going to go and do these sort of things. I might put a few quid in the collection, but I'm not going to be up on Lord Ahmed's roof or whatever. Not me. No, it can apply to anybody. 1 minute you're going about your lawful business, the next minute someone rams into the back of your car on the way home from here tonight. You get out to exchange insurance details, and they are some kind of chip on the shoulder ethnic who, when the police pass, immediately says, he or she called me a black bastard. Bang, yeah, I tell you, you're inside. You are inside with the police, and they're not there to help you. But pretend they're there to help you. Look, if you own up to a minor thing, and we'll get you out of here, get you home, don't worry. It won't be anything big. Just say that you can see that it could have offended them, and we'll get you out of here. They're not doing that for your good. They're doing that because they want a conviction. And especially, they want a conviction. Let's be very blunt about this in London. They want a conviction of a white person. Because it helps even up the statistics. When you've got so many criminal vermin imported from all over the world, the stats in this country are a nightmare for them. If they can get some white people in as criminals as well, they've done their job. So don't expect fairness, don't expect decency, or don't expect, if this is frightening you, don't expect if I walk away from this, it won't affect me. Because like I say, you run into someone's car, when they run into yours, and bang, all of a sudden they play the race card. So on behalf of our activists, but also on behalf of our people out there as a whole, we need to start teaching people what to do if you get arrested by the police. And it's simple. Really simple, actually. Whatever you say nothing. That's the golden rule. And they'll say you're incriminating yourself. We can draw all sorts of inferences from this. They'll have 101 reasons why you should talk, to the fact they won't give you a cup of tea unless you do. Or you'll be in for 10 days unless you speak. Nonsense. The only thing that gets people convicted 9 times out of 10 is because they can't keep their mouths shut and they talk. And whether you're guilty or you're innocent, once you're talking, the police can twist it round and they get what they want. That's how they work. So, should you be in trouble because you're one of our frontline volunteers, or because you're an ordinary activist, or just because you're a white Londoner, just remember that simple rule. Whatever you say, say nothing. Give them your name, give them your address, and after that, just say, no comment, no comment, no comment, no comment. And don't ever say anything else to them other than, I want to see a solicitor. That's all you need to do. Alright, so people need to be trained in that kind of thing. The right to silence, whatever they say, it's still there, and it gets most people out of prison and away and safe. We need to set up a legal defence fund to provide assistance for people who get arrested in the cause of duty. Now, we can't just have lots of big appeals, because if we have lots of big appeals for that, we'll have a tremendous legal defence fund, but the party will collapse because the party costs money to run. It's an expensive business. It's as simple as that. Keeping the motor going, keeping the machinery going, defending our website against attacks. That costs us a huge sum of money, month after month after month, just running that website and defending it, because it's our voice to the world. It's our version of the BBC. Not as many people watch it, but the ones who do, it has a huge effect. So things like that cost money. So we can't just say, well, we'll stop appealing for the party generally, and we'll just appeal for our people on the front line. We can do it a bit, but we haven't got that much money. It involves groups like this, new branches, old branches, saying, well, we'll do a fundraising event. A summer barbecue, if we get a day of summer, for instance, or something at Christmas, whatever it is, or some little regular raffle type swindle, or all chip in a pound and you get the numbers on the lottery, whatever it is, 101 ways to raise money. But as well as raising money for the local party and for local elections, just a little bit of effort into raising money for a legal defence fund, so that the lads and lasses on the front line have actually got some backup. That is something we can't irresponsibly just say, charge! You know, that's the traditional British way, over the top, blow the whistle, and over you go, lads, tally-ho. You know, no, we've got to do this in a systematic, organised way, so that we don't wear people out, we don't grind people down, and we don't send people into battle unsupported. So that's very, very important. But finally, we need a system whereby we don't just say to people, right, go off and pick your targets, have fun. It's got to be systematic, it's got to be centrally controlled by people who are experienced in these things and who understand where we need to go. Because the key thing, anything we do, this is true actually of any activity of any sort, we have to ask ourselves before we do it, do the public get it? So for instance, we had a group of lads recently who wanted to have all sorts of demos about freedom of speech. Sorry, the public don't care. We care, a few people care, but most people don't care. And they were not sure whether to have a demonstration on freedom of speech or against the Dalkeith rapist. So you've got to step back. This is why it needs experienced political hands deciding, because when you think about it, there is no comparison. Because every single member of the public understands the point and sympathises with a party that's saying, get a sex beast off the streets and protect young girls in this town. Whereas they think about a political party saying, we want free speech. But all they see is another bunch of politicians arguing for something which benefits them. You know, it's sad, but it's a simple case. So we need to direct what we're doing with these things very carefully. So will the public get it? What will the public get? This, that the BNP is different and the British National Party is on our side. That's what we need to get across with these things, whatever we do. That's the key of it. Anything else is irrelevant. We might like it, but if the public don't take from it, the British National Party is different and the British National Party are on our side, then it's a wasted effort. It's got to be honed down to those things. Whatever, mustn't be our own hobby horses. You know, I go chasing around after wind farms, for instance, and global warming being nonsense. But it doesn't really grip the public, you know, except in places where wind farms are being built. But it's not going to work in Elton, is it? You know, so I have to put my hobby horse to one side. So we need to be very careful. Because we've got to get across to the public that the British National Party is different and the British National Party is on our side. And we haven't got very long to do it. We've got to do it before the storm strikes. Actually, two storms. There's the storm of a financial catastrophe of global historic proportions, which is about to wash over the whole of the world. It's only just starting, but it's coming. There's this huge crisis. It's not just the euro, it's depression in the United States at the same time. It's China, the seemingly endless motor of growth, hitting the buffers, the whole lot is coming together, and there is a financial catastrophe looming, which will be like the 1930s. And the only way they got out of the 1930s was to have a war. A world war. You can't have a world war where most people have got nuclear bombs. It's a really dangerous problem. So there's this enormous problem. It's the end of a period when globalised capitalism was just doing great, there was nothing could stop it, things could carry on growing forever, and the whole system's crumbling. This is all based on debt, it can't carry on, and it's about to hit the buffers on a huge scale. The second thing is, I'm sure you know, having seen and felt what London was like last August, about a year ago, that there's a storm, basically it's what Powell saw, when Through a Glass Darkly from 1968, decades ago, he saw, because he was a visionary, he actually saw it. He didn't just think it intellectually, he felt it, he saw it, what was coming with what was described as the rivers of blood speech. He knew what was going to happen, partly because he'd been in India, when my dad was at about the same time, and he saw different communities who basically got on, suddenly fell apart in hatred and loathing and mutual mass murder. So partly because he'd seen it, but also because the man was a visionary, and he felt and saw what is going to happen in this country. I don't think it'll start in London, as a matter of fact, it's far more likely at present to start in Birmingham, between the blacks and the Muslims, in fact the Muslims and everybody. There's hell on, just around the corner, sooner or later.
Excuse me, 700 of those people arrested are about to be released.
A lot have been released, yes indeed. We were promised really tough penalties for the rioters, and just as the anniversary is coming up, it becomes clear that they've let lots of them out. So where on earth is the pressure to stop them doing it again? Where is it? It's not there. Because to most of those kids, a lot of them were kids, 6 months in prison is a badge of honour. It's like an ASBO when they were little. It's no good giving these little buggers ASBOs. It's a badge of honour. It shows they're tough. And a few months in prison, when you've got no job prospects, when you don't give a damn, when you hate British society all around you in any case, and when you come out, they actually treat you right and they give you a social worker. If you're a good kid, you get nothing in this city. Absolutely bugger all nothing. If you're a criminal scumbag, when you come out, they give you your own personal social worker, your own guidance to get you into a nice job. Go and if you manage to see Prince Charles, he'll give you a directorship on the Prince's Trust. You got it made if you're caught rioting, especially if you're not an indigenous Brit. So there's no, they haven't stopped people, they haven't frightened people, it's all ready to go bang. But what happened in London really actually wasn't that serious in a bizarre way, because mainly they were just looting. They weren't trying to kill their neighbours because they're the other colour skin, because they're a different religion. And that's what's going to happen in Birmingham. As soon as it goes off, that's what's going to happen in Birmingham. Not because of us. We don't go to central Birmingham. There's nothing in Birmingham for the British National Party in the middle of it. There's nothing in huge swathes of Birmingham for us. There's none of our people left in huge swathes of Birmingham. There's just Muslims and blacks and all sorts of others, and they all hate each other. And it's going to be a catastrophe. And the only question is which catastrophe strikes first, the economic one or the racial ethnic one. In a way, it's a question, it doesn't matter what the answer is, because whichever one happens first, it's going to make the other one happen second. Particularly, you can't have an economic crisis in overcrowded, bankrupt Britain and not have it spilling over into all sorts of different communal problems. So there is hell on just around the corner. Next week, next month, 5 years down the line, I don't know. But I'll tell you what, it's coming. Without a shadow of a doubt. And basically everyone out there gets it. And the political elite get it, and the police get it, because if you look at their inventory of plastic bullets, where a couple of years ago they had a few hundred, now they've got thousands of the things. As a matter of fact, they can't use them. They've been told they can't, because they've been found that they don't comply with human rights legislation. I suspect they'll say we'll have to ignore the human rights legislation, and we'll use them in any case, because they're going to need it. They're going to need them. We have to be ready for that time. And the question of whether it's the economic crisis or the ethnic crisis that strikes first, that's not the important question. The question is whether this party is ready to take advantage of it, ready to offer people not just hope, but actually answers, and ready to step forward. Because if we don't, nobody else will. The question is, will we be ready? The question is, are you ready? Is the British National Party here ready? We're not yet. Make no bones about it. We're not ready yet. but we can be ready. If we set our minds to it, if we set our wills to it, if we set our hearts to it, we can be ready to be the force that saves this country, saves this people, and saves a future for the children of this country, not for 5 years, not for 10 years, but forever. Thank you very much.